Welcome back into the Red Zone Podcast. My name is Colten Bartholomew, UW football beat reporter here for the Wisconsin State Journal, joined by longtime beat reporter and now columnist Jim Polzin. And Jim, the Badger football team is on a 6-game winning streak, probably playing their best football of the year, considering both sides of the ball. Just what do you make of where this team's at right now? Because it's such a far cry from where we were about 2 months ago, sitting in this room talking about, is this team going to make a bowl game, or what major changes have to happen for this program?
Yeah, I think they become the Iowa of early season, right? I just think that's so much of it. I think so much of this is turnovers. The defense is forcing them. The offense isn't committing them, although they had 3 the other day. But they're winning the turnover margin, and that's what teams that have this fine margin of victory because of talent issues have to do. And they're playing more Wisconsin football. Yeah,
and you mentioned the 3 turnovers. 2 of them were when the game was
out
of hand, but still, no, it wasn't. It didn't help the turnover margin. It was like they get through that game, and you're like, oh, they're finally getting the positive turnover margin, and then a couple of backup running backs don't let that happen. But give you guys a quick rundown of the show today. We're going to give you a breakdown of Wisconsin, Nebraska, the next Big Ten game here on the schedule, a 2:30 kickoff at Camp Randall. You can watch that on ABC. And then something a little different, a little more fun, seeing as it's going to be senior day, and it's a weird situation with the COVID year, and it's going to be like this for the next few seasons, where there are 6 guys, super seniors, that are playing their last game at Camp Randall. Everybody else you can assume, or there are guys you think are going to the league or trying to graduate and leave Wisconsin, but we know there are 6 guys who are playing their last games at Wisconsin. So we're going to talk about their best moments. Those 6 guys are the best moments of their careers, their best games, and then we're going to make our Big Ten picks, which Jim needs to get out of the doghouse here. We need to turn this around now. So we're on a lot of the same ones. So maybe we'll get back on the track together here. So we'll get into all of that right after this. All right, Jim, we're going to start with the breakdown here of Saturday's game between Wisconsin and Nebraska. We started the show talking about the winning streak that the Badgers are on and how they're playing their best football, and it's pretty much the exact opposite for Nebraska. And I wouldn't say they're playing bad football. It's just the stuff that's been apparent with Scott Frost at Nebraska. They've got talent. They've got some guys that can cause different tough matchups for you. It's just they don't finish drives, they don't finish games, they don't finish in key situations, and it's just kind of more of the same. 2 teams that are, if you just put the talent on paper, I mean, Nebraska's not that far behind where Wisconsin is, and you could argue, receiver-wise, Samori Toure is probably the best receiver on the field on Saturday. It's just the totality of it all. Wisconsin's in a much better place in terms of just playing better football.
And culture, and I think just one program knows how to win, and the other program is trying to figure out how to win. And that's what we've seen with Nebraska. They've been in every game that they've lost, just can't find a way to get over the top. So they're scary in that regard, though, I think. I think you're right. Like, the talent gap isn't big, if at all, and so you just wonder if at some point they're going to put it all together. Coming off a bye week, I think that's kind of a scary proposition for Wisconsin. They're facing a team that's a little more fresh than they are. So I think it's going to make for an interesting matchup on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let's jump into the offense here, because I mentioned it in the lead into the show here. A couple of backup running backs had fumbles last week, Jackson Aker and then Julius Davis. Braylon Allen, we've seen just this incredible rise the second part of the year. Basically, after that 1-3 start, Braylon Allen coming in really gave a shot of life to this team, and I think his emergence, along with the steps forward that the rest of the offensive line, the rest of the offense as a whole took, it all kind of came together at that right moment. But we talked about it last week with Ches Maluzzi. We thought at the time probably out for a while, and it got confirmed basically, a couple hours after the podcast dropped, of course, but that Ches Maluzzi is going to be out for the season. So now it's Braylon Allen's show in the backfield. I think you wrote it well in your story or in your column from Saturday's game. It's Braylon Allen or bust, in all honesty, in this backfield right now. And that's not a great position for a team to be in when you know that to be good, you've got to run the ball well 25 to 35 times a game. And
you have a guy that's is a physical runner and likes the physical part of it, right? So he's not going to Brian Calhoun back in the day, 2005, was really good at avoiding hits. Mm-hmm. He had a tremendous workload that year, but he was really good at avoiding unnecessary hits. Braylon Allen, I think, is still learning that to some degree. He wants to create contact, and there was one play I didn't mention in my column where he hurdled a guy. Beautiful, right? That was kind of I wrote about the take your breath away moment. But by hurdling this guy, he set himself up for a really big hit.
Yeah, and got walloped.
Right? And so that's kind of you hold your breath because if he doesn't get up, if he's out for an extended period, it's going to be really hard for this offense to function. And so, there's a give and take. I wasn't critical of Paul Chryst for his decision to keep Braylon Allen in the game as long as he did. I mean, I thought that pitch count of 26 touches, I think 25 carries and a reception, that's fine, right? Like, that's not overworked. I think you could have taken him out at halftime. That game was probably in the bag at that point, but I don't know that that's necessarily fair to him, and I think you want to give him as many reps as possible too. So I think it's a tricky situation for a coach, deciding when is the right time to do it.
Yeah, and I think because of the situation they're in injury-wise, you've got to start getting Braylon Allen ready for if you're going to get to the level you want to get to, which is potentially the Rose Bowl. I mean, it's a big pie in the sky thing. You got to win the Big Ten to get there, but it's possible. Like the Badgers are in a situation they win out the rest of their games and they could get there. Braylon Allen's going to be that 25 carry a game guy. I'm with you because you and I talked about it throughout the game. Like, all right, when do you take him out? When do you put him on bubble wrap? And I was with you. I said, do you let Braylon Allen put his pads on at halftime again? Like, because 21-0, the way the defense was playing, Northwestern wasn't going to come back in that game. But I think that balance, and I think Paul Chryst was fair when you asked him about it after the game. He said you don't know when that moment is. But I think part of his equation has to be we have to get Braylon Allen ready for that type of workload. And I don't know if there's a way you can do that in practice without just here's a Saturday that the game's in hand. You don't have to do anything crazy, but you've got to get ready for those 25 carries a game.
Right. I think he had only carried his most was 20 leading into the game, right?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, you want to see if the guy can carry 25 to 30 games. Like, not even looking ahead to the Rose Bowl, but if they get to the Big Ten championship game against Ohio State, he's going to have to carry a really heavy load that day. So, I get why they do it, and I would not want to be a coach's position. I think you and I kind of probably lean more conservative in that regard in terms of when to take a guy out. And in some regards, you got to trust the kid too. And I wonder how much talking's going on behind the scenes. Like, hey,
how you feeling?
How you feeling? Right. But I love what you did there with the hurdle. Just know that you're probably setting yourself up for bigger hits than you have to take.
Yeah, no, for real. The issue that I have, or not, I guess not issue, but I guess the question that I have for the Badgers going forward here is, okay, you've got Brady Shipper, who's been your third down back and is now kind of your number two. And I really liked what I saw out of Brady Shipper when the game was still in hand. I mean, later on, I think he got 6 of his 7 carries when it was 35-0 or 35-7. But I really liked what I saw from him picking up blitzers, which was an issue early on in the season. He's done a lot better at that in the last month or so. He runs hard, and I think what he does really well is he is patient in the backfield to a point where he lets the blocks happen and then doesn't wait for a huge play. Like he has the right mentality for his role. If I go get 4 or 5 yards, I did my job, and that's a successful play for us. Maybe I get 2 or 3 of those, then we get Allen back in, right? So I like what I saw out of him. I just wonder how much they need to try to get him some more carries in the thick of the game when it's actually a contest, because if you could get to a point where, like we keep talking about, some of these better games you're going to play, hopefully in the postseason, you're going to need a little bit of a spell for Allen mid-drive, because I think what we've seen is he carries the load for a long drive. Shipper comes in, maybe the next one does the first couple of plays, and then Allen comes back in. I just wonder if you can somehow mix those two a little bit more throughout a game.
Yeah, I wonder that too. I did like what they did with him with the seam route in the passing. That was very nice. Yeah, it was a little different wrinkle, and I think he's capable as a receiver. So I like that they use him that way. I agree with you. And the thing you wonder, like, if God forbid Braylon Allen does go down in the first half of this game or the Minnesota game or something, is Brady Shipper the type of guy that can get you through the rest of the game? And we just don't know that. Like we haven't seen enough. So I kind of lean towards you, like, hey, give him a series in the first half. And yet, I also see riding the hot hand so you get a lead. It's just like, I'll go back to this. I would not want to be a coach in terms of figuring out playing time and when to pull guys and when guys need carries to, kind of give them the experience that they're going to inevitably need.
Yeah, especially when you've got a thinned out position like this at running back, like the Badgers have. This is a really tough position for Paul Chryst. And, I think we see on Twitter every other possession, it's like, well, why didn't Braylon Allen get that carry? It's like you just said, eventually you've got to get some of these guys in the flow of a game or, some experience. But
one other thing, one other thing I'm getting a lot of is why he didn't play earlier this season.
I'll take that one because
please do.
In talking with players and the guys around him, there was a process beyond training camp for him in understanding the plays. I think first off, they did not trust him whatsoever in pass protection. And if you put out I'm saying early in the season, they do now, but if you put out a guy in the backfield and you just automatically tell a defense, hey, we're running because he's in, that's not a good situation, and it's going to get him lit up. So I think there was a process there that he had to get used to, the pass protections. And then you've heard Graham Mertz talk about it. You've heard Braylon Allen talk about it. There was I'm not saying a crisis of confidence, but there was a little bit of like, man, did I make the right decision trying to play running back? There was, can I do this? Should I, move the defense? There was a lot of things going on that I think he had to get through. And again, we talk about every time he carries the ball. This kid's 17 years old. First time that he hasn't been the absolute best player on the field of his football team. I mean, he's up there for this team, which is pretty incredible. But I think there was a legitimate time necessary in the season beyond training camp, getting through the flow of practices, getting to understand a game week, what you have to do to prepare to get him ready to produce like this. Now, could you say 2-3 weeks in that was probably there? I think we started hearing it that Michigan week. And then with what happened after Michigan with Jalen Berger and all that stuff and, Isaac Orendo getting hurt, just that all kind of came together. That Illinois game was just that perfect storm. Braylon Allen's coming out party, and now it's been his show. But I really do think it took a few weeks into the season for him to be ready to do that. And we know from covering this team, if you listen to Paul Chryst, he is deadly serious. He will not put somebody out there if he doesn't think they're mentally ready and physically ready, and I don't think that's where Braylon Allen was the first few weeks.
Yeah, for their own good and for their teammates' good. He did allude the other night after the game, or a day after the game, on how training camp kind of humbled him. I think it was eye-opening in a lot of ways. So, I get it. Like, I'll go back when fans complain about playing time and stuff, that these coaches spend way more time seeing these guys in practice and film and all that, and they're only going to put out guys that can help them win, right? There's no reason if Braylon Allen would have shown in training camp that he was better than any of those guys, that they wouldn't have played him. I mean, they would have played him if he gives them a better chance to win. So you kind of have to trust the coaching staff to some degree.
Yeah, and I do want to say, I understand that Braylon Allen has been great. Let's not diminish how good Ches Maluzzi was until he got hurt. He was playing really good football. So I don't want that to get lost in that discussion. But you mentioned the wheel route to Brady Shipper, and I think that was one of the better throws of Graham Mertz's day. And talking about this offense as a whole, the step forward that the passing game has taken, and the way that Graham Mertz is throwing the ball and getting protected right now, I think the passing game hasn't looked this good probably since 2019 with Jack Cohn in terms of getting guys. And I know it's a 2-week sample size here, or I guess 3.
It's like 2.5, really. Yeah. I mean, I said somewhere else that he's really put together 5 really good halves. The first half against Iowa, the second half was not good, obviously. But 5 of the last 6 halves have been really, really good.
Yeah. I think just getting more guys involved, the protection that he's had, the concepts, really kind of honing in on, I'd say, 4 or 5 concepts that really work for this team and for this personnel and what defenses are doing. I mean, talking with multiple receivers after the game on Saturday, teams are still keying in on Jake Ferguson. They say, hey, we can shut down this passing game if Jake Ferguson's not involved. It's not a bad strategy on paper. It's just we're seeing Graham Mertz finding Kendrick Pryor, Danny Davis, a little bit of Chimere DK more often, and it's supplementing the passing game and getting them first downs. And I think that's the thing that has been the most impressive from Graham Mertz is, in that Northwestern game, I believe 7 of his first 10 passes went for first downs. And when you're moving the chains like that with what you've already got on the ground, I mean, that's what you need out of this offense. And I think if there's one kind of total picture or total kind of realization that Graham Mertz has had this season, it's that, he can have a really good game but he doesn't have to make huge,
Right.
amazing plays. It can just be that efficiency, getting first downs, scoring when he needs to, converting some third and mediums, third and longs if the running game doesn't get there. Just playing within the offense, you can still put up big numbers.
Yeah, and I thought the other thing that stood out to me the other day was a couple times he avoided pressure and got something out of nothing, right? Where it wasn't a big gain, but it's certainly he avoided a negative gain. He didn't make a terrible decision and turn the ball over, which, early in the season would have been a big concern. So I think he's just matured as a quarterback. The other thing that stood out is some of his throws were he threw into coverage a couple times where the ball was right there on the money where only his guy could catch it. And we didn't see that a lot early in the season too. So I don't know. I think he's really been, it's a steady improvement and it's encouraging, certainly.
Yeah, I think over the last few weeks we've seen Graham Mertz is kind of capping what he's the amount of risk he's willing to take at one play. I know people were, and Paul Chris said it was a little disappointing they didn't score right before halftime with Graham Mertz throwing that pick. I don't hate that throw. It's a little long. It wasn't super accurate, but give Danny Davis a shot 50-50 in the end zone. The thought process was there. Just the actual throw was a little bit long and got picked off. But you have to like that aggressiveness because we talked about it all the time. You got to take some shots. So I like that. It's hard to say on one hand take shots, but then get mad if it doesn't work out. That's the reality of taking shots.
Right, because the week earlier he had done the same thing and Pryor came down with a 50-50 basically, right? I mean, so yeah, and especially at that time of the game, that score, I mean, it's different, right, if he's doing that if they're trailing Nebraska by 3 or something, or it's a tie game and he's throwing 50-50 balls where a turnover really, really hurts you. But
right.
I like time and score. I was fine with that too.
One thing I do want to say about this matchup in particular, when we were talking about the offense in general here, but with this Nebraska matchup, Nebraska lost JoJo Doman, their linebacker, who's I would personally think is their best player. I know Luke Raymer and a couple other guys have better stats, but just in terms of impact, I think he was one of their best player this year. He hurt his hand. He's done for the season. They have run I don't think their issue has been defensively. They have not. They got torched by Ohio State's passing game. Everybody's getting that lately. That's not really a big knock on them. But I think the way that they attack offenses with their defensive line, really shifting them around, doing different stunts and different slants and games and things, is a good test for how this offensive line for the Badgers has been playing, because they've been doing really well passing things off, making sure that Joe Tippmann is getting the right calls. In all honesty, helping out the left side because that's been their weaker passing side with Tyler Beach, but making sure the guys are all picked up, and that's I think as important as Graham Mertz's accuracy as anything is him being clean. I just think this is going to be a really fun test for this offensive line because Nebraska blitzes, but what they do is they come off the edge a lot. They trust their defensive line to get pressure with 4, and if they do blitz, it's going to be coming off the edge, and that's more often than not going to be a running back's responsibility or a tight end's responsibility. So I'm really looking forward to that offensive line matchup because Nebraska's doing some really creative things up front. Somebody
asked me for Open Gym this week if I thought adjustments was the biggest reason why this offensive line has played better. I don't know. My answer, I'm in the process of writing it right now. My answer was going to be I just think it comes down to continuity and experience are the bigger factors. I just think I probably downplayed early in the season the fact that basically the only guy returning at his position was Logan Bross, who was limited in training camp too. Like him and Beach were limited in camp. Tippmann's essentially a first-year starter. Jack Nelson is a first-year starter. Seltzner's been in and out of the lineup. He's a little more experience there. But they just had a lot of guys that hadn't played a lot at their positions and certainly a lot together. And I do think offensive line is one of those things where you need time and to get cohesive. And I think we're seeing a little bit more of that. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And just straight up confidence. I think because of that inexperience in playing, and then when you struggle early on, I think there was that time where they were just like, man, what are we? Like, are we good enough? And then I think they've showed last month or so that they're really rolling, and it's fun watching them run block right now and doing some of the things that they're doing because we saw against Northwestern. And this is, I think, a little bit more Northwestern specific because of how they were crashing in their defensive ends. But some of the pin and pull stuff that they were doing with the center pulling around, the tackles pulling around with a tight end crashing down on the blocks, that was stuff that they would do with their best offensive lines, the most athletic offensive lines. Like we're talking, 17 range.
Yep.
So I think that type of stuff is starting to come back. And maybe it doesn't change a ton for the offense right now, but I think that's a really good sign for guys like Joe Tippmann, Jack Nelson, who are going to be here going forward. And then we know the athletes that they've got behind them. So I think there's some encouraging things for this offensive line that weren't showing up early on in the year.
Yeah, I mean, and that's we've talked about this. We've each kind of written about it, but why is this offense working as a whole, run and pass? I think everybody else says 1/11th, right? Everybody's got to do their part. I think we're seeing more of that, right? Where all 5 guys on the line are doing their part. Receivers, Graham Mertz is certainly doing his part. Running backs, it seems like a more cohesive group.
It does. So let's jump over to the defense here for this Nebraska matchup. And, I say this knocking on wood, but, I'm impressed by how healthy this defense has been. And when you look at across the Big Ten, they're one of the healthier defenses. They've only lost, Leo Chanel missed those first 2 games because of his COVID diagnosis. Faion Hicks missed a game. Colin Wilder missed a game, that Eastern Michigan game early on. Since then, they've had their starters out there, and that has clearly helped them because we know the talent and the cohesiveness of this defensive group. And I think the way that they've gotten off the field, nation's best third down defense, limiting plays, it's about 57 plays per game that they're playing. I mean, that's, given the pace of college football right now and the offenses that they're playing, that's an incredible number to playing 57 plays a game.
Yeah, so they're not getting worn down. I think also they're doing a good job of keeping guys fresh with their rotations, defensive line especially. I mean, they're not afraid to use guys, backups, and keep those guys fresh. I think in the secondary we've seen different safety combinations. So I think the depth on this team, that unit in particular, really, really stands out. And I think that's one reason why they've been able to kind of stay healthy this late in the season. But I think you did probably just jinx it in some degree.
Yeah, I mean, now somebody's going to tear their ACL on Saturday. I'm going to feel bad about it. But I think having that depth, and especially up front, like you mentioned, and the safeties, because I think those are the 2 groups that are going to have the biggest role in containing a guy like Adrian Martinez. And you asked, I think it was you, that asked Jim Leonard on Monday about, playing this defense or playing this offense, and Adrian Martinez, a guy that they've have a bunch of history with and has been there for a long time. And every time they play Martinez in this Nebraska offense, it puts up yards.
Yes.
Not a ton of points, but more points than you would expect given, how good the defense is. But Wisconsin's been able to run away with it. I think this is the year that, because of what they're doing with their safeties, getting them down in the box, guys like Scott Nelson, Hunter Wohler, who are, good enough athletes to chase Martinez down, and then what they can do with the defensive line up front and doing a little bit of more pocket contain with the talent they have there. I think they're going to be able to keep Martinez in the pocket and make him just a straight-up thrower. And that's the few teams that have been able to do that against Nebraska. That's when they've fallen into some trouble, because Martinez is best when he's kind of wheeling and dealing back there and making plays.
Yeah, Jim Leonard alluded to that on Monday, how the 2019 game was kind of an eye-opener in terms of they need to change their scheme a little bit. I wish I would have followed up and had him elaborate a little bit, but I do think that was kind of, even though they won that game, it was kind of a whoa moment, like, hey, we need to do things a little bit differently against these dual-threat mobile quarterbacks, because they're able to move the ball, pass and run. And so, yeah, I go into this game, and I think they'll probably be able to force Martinez into mistakes, which has been one of his Achilles heels. So, I'm not all that concerned that he's going to torch them on Saturday.
No, I'm with you there. And I think it was interesting how I watched Scott Frost's press conference before he came in here and started recording. He said that tempo isn't the answer, which is funny because it seems like, when you look at the Penn State game, Eastern Michigan tried tempo, other teams have tried tempo against Wisconsin. But tempo fails if you have a 3 and out, and then off the Badger offense comes on the field and has it for 6 minutes, and then you're just out of rhythm like that. And Scott Frost, I think one of the legitimate criticism of him has been he has just been so stubborn about what he wants to do, and tempo has been part of their offense when it's been good against some of the lesser teams they've played. I think this is a step in what seems to be an overall kind of direction change of this offense. Like, it seems like they're going to adjust a little bit more, and that's something that it took firing 4 assistants and having his job on the hot seat for 2+ years and all that stuff to get there. But I think that this offense is going to come out with some things that Wisconsin's defense hasn't seen. I really do feel like they're going to play with some reckless abandon, because if you're a Nebraska player right now, what do you have to lose? Like,
right.
Obviously you're playing for pride. You want to win. I'm not saying that they're not going to try to win, but like, you're not going to a bowl game. You're in a situation where you've got the 2 best defenses, or 2 of the 3 best defenses in your conference in the last 2 weeks. Just kind of go for broke here.
Yeah, try it. I mean, these are almost like bold developmental practices where you can kind of build in next year. I do wonder, the one thing, we've alluded to this a little bit over the last couple of weeks, is the one constant in the 6-game winning streak for Wisconsin is they've grabbed the lead early, which has allowed the defense to just really be aggressive. I mean, I should have looked this up, but their only time they've trailed throughout this thing is 3 points at Purdue, right? Weren't they down?
No, it was 3 points for Rutgers, wasn't it?
Did Rutgers have a lead on Wisconsin? I thought Purdue was up briefly.
Go ahead. No.
Well, whatever. Anyways, the point is they have not trailed very much. Typically, Wisconsin's grabbing a first quarter lead, extending it because the defense has been very aggressive, and it's kind of allowed them to, force turnovers and make that lead even bigger. So I think that's, if I wondered that last week with Northwestern, is Northwestern drives down 19 plays. I'm like, if Northwestern grabs a lead here, how does Wisconsin react to that? Because it's been so long since Wisconsin's had to react to trailing in a game.
Yeah, and I don't think it's to a point where Wisconsin should take the ball off a kickoff if they were to win, or kick off a coin flip if they win it. But it's close because it's so important. And I guess you could argue that the defense coming out and get a 3-and-out is
right.
just as impactful. But I just think that you're right. There's that early lead, and that being a consistent theme here, it just allows them to play how they want to play. And it takes off that pressure, because we heard defensive players talk about that first month. We got to give us a lead a little bit, where we're not just like one mistake is going to put us behind and we're not going to get back in the game.
Right, yeah. They felt like they had to be perfect, and no defense can be perfect.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so make sure you stick on madison.com. We got more Nebraska game preview stuff coming online all week on madison.com. We're going to jump into our Super Seniors discussion here. Like we said, there's 6 guys that are going to be playing their last game at Camp Randall, so I want to talk a little bit about their careers and some of their best moments. And we're doing this alphabetical, so this is not any favoritism or anything, but we're going to start with Noah Burks, the outside linebacker who I would say this year has taken one of the bigger steps forward of anybody on the roster in terms of their production and their level of play compared to what we've seen throughout the rest of their career. So when you talk about some of his best moments, Jim, I thought there's 3 that came to my mind. There was the 2019 regular season game at Ohio State. Now, obviously, that was an ugly loss for the Badgers and not one that a lot of people want to remember. But Jim Leonard has mentioned that was kind of the turnaround, like aha moment for Noah Burks. Like, hey, this is how I have to play at this level, and this is how I can produce. He had 8 tackles, 1.5 sacks in that game. And I think the other one in terms of a game was Iowa this year, where he had 3 tackles, 2 sacks. I mean, the front 7 was just so dominant that game, and he was a big part of it. And he had a fumble recovery that gave the Badgers at the 1. What would you say would be his best moment?
I think the Iowa one, just because it comes in a win. And you're right. I was a little skeptical last year, even just how good is he? He kind of reminds me a little bit of Garrett Dooley a couple years ago. That team came in. Big question marks at outside linebacker because Leon Jacobs and Garrett Dooley hadn't played a ton and ended up being a really good duo, and there wasn't much drop-off from the year before. And that's a little bit how I feel with Burks, too, is that he was my question mark. Kind of knew what you're going to get in Nick Herbig, that he was kind of a rising star. Burks has been, I don't want to say just a guy, but there was that risk of him being just a guy last year. He's really elevated his game and has been solid, and not just a guy that's out there doing his job. He's made impact plays, and I think that's been really impressive.
Yeah, I'll give one honorable mention for moments for Noah Burks would be proposing to his girlfriend after the Army game this year. That was cool for him with his family in town, with his brother playing for Army. So nice moment for him, and one that I'm sure he'll remember for a long time. Probably forever if we're being hopeful that the marriage lasts.
Yeah, good luck.
All right, next one here on the Super Seniors list, we got Jack Dunn, Madison product, obviously. The two moments that came to my mind would be the 2019 game against Purdue. It was a very sparsely attended blowout late in that season, but he had an 18-yard touchdown and made one of my more memorable quotes covering this team so far is somebody asked about, why did you go for Jack Dunn on that play for that touchdown? Chris said that nobody expects the Dunner. And I just find it really funny, that Chris always throws an ER on people's names for his nicknames for him. So I like that one. And then my other one would be the Minnesota game last year where, all the injuries at the wide receiver position are well documented, but in the 2020 season. But he had 7 catches, 76 yards, and then the go-ahead touchdown from Chase Wolf, no less, on that drive. So what would you go with there, Jim?
I'm going to go with that one. That game's probably more memorable for Garrett Groshek, kind of carrying a team that was just, so I think the spotlight got taken a little bit from Jack Dunn that game. But certainly, like you mentioned, they needed him considering where they were from an injury standpoint at wide receiver. So that's the one I'm going to take. I just think he came up big that day.
Yeah. Next one here, we got Mike Mascalunas, who's had a tough time getting on the field at his position of inside linebacker because of just how good and stacked this team has been at inside linebacker since he's been here. You look at, Chris Orr, TJ Edwards, and then Jack Sanborn, Leo Chenal after that. But two moments that I have here, the South Florida game in 2019, he had a career-high 6 tackles. That was a blowout, and he played quite a bit toward the end of the game. And then you have the Penn State game this year, I think. I mentioned earlier in the show, Leo Chenal missing that game for his COVID diagnosis. First career start out of him. And, on top of that, he finds out basically 36 hours before the game that he's starting, maybe a little bit less than that. Ends up with 2 tackles and a tackle for loss. Jim, what do you got?
I think that one, the Penn State game, stands out just because of the timing of it and the nature of it. I do wonder, and this is not to take away from him, but having seen how great Leo Chenal has been this season, if he's in the lineup that day, is the outcome different?
Yeah, it's hard to say it wouldn't be because of how many huge plays and how often Leo Chenal has been in the backfield. And I'm with you. That's not a knock on Mike Mascalunas. I thought he actually played pretty well that day, but I think you're right. I think Leo Chenal makes one big impact play, whether it's a sack or a fumble or something like that, I think ends up turning that play.
I think Mascalunas plays a lot of football here, if not the fact he's got 2 all-timers ahead of him, right? It's just hard to get Sanborn and Chenal off the field at this point. But I think had circumstances been different, Mike Mascalunas could have been a really serviceable starter here.
Yeah, and actually, when I wrote a story about him early on in the season, I think it was before that Eastern Michigan game, I asked him, you're clearly good here. You probably could have been a high-level starter, somewhere else. Why did that ever not happen? I thought it was a really interesting answer. So I'll tease that one. Make sure you go to madison.com and go back and look up that story on Mike Mascalunas. But next one here on the list, we've got Kendrick Pryor, senior receiver. Just going back through their game logs, you just remember, Kendrick Pryor has made a ton of plays for this offense.
Yeah.
And, they're seem to be a little more isolated, it's one play in a game and that type of thing. But he's been around for so long. He's just made a lot of plays for this offense. So the two moments that I've got for you to pick here, Jim, are Iowa in 2017, where he had a 25-yard touchdown run and a 12-yard touchdown catch in a blowout. It's only a multi-touchdown game in his career, but obviously a big rivalry game there. And then this year at Notre Dame, or against Notre Dame in Chicago, he had 6 catches for 69 yards and a touchdown, and he is a Chicago guy out of Hazel Green. So what would you go with on Kendrick Pryor?
Taking the Iowa game, and you're right, he's a guy that's made a lot of plays in his career and almost gets forgotten to some degree. I'll say this, too, about Kendrick Pryor. He's one of my favorites to deal with.
One of the nicest guys.
Right, and I think I've alluded to this, too, but I appreciate the fact that a wide receiver can come here and not get frustrated, or at least not show the frustrations publicly over not getting the ball enough. And to me, that's the sign of a true player. You need guys like that. Pryor could be somewhere else putting up bigger numbers, yet he's constantly shows up after games on Mondays and is friendly and is positive, and he's been a joy to deal with.
He really has, and it's interesting because when you talk to him, he talks often about that moped accident back in 2016, and that really, I think, changed not only his outlook on football but just kind of everything, because that was a lot more serious than it ended. It could have been a lot more serious, I should say, than it ended up being. It ended up being just more some scars and stuff. But I think that kind of opened his eyes, like really embrace what he's doing and enjoy the moment. So I'm with you. Kendrick Pryor is one of my favorite guys to talk to. And another one of my favorite guys to talk to from the last few years, safety Colin Wilder, playing his last game at Camp Randall. The two moments that I've got for you to pick from here, Jim, would be Northwestern 2019. That was his first start at Wisconsin. And if you guys remember, this was after it was coming off the Michigan game where both starting safeties, Eric Burrell and Reggie Pearson, were out for the first half because of targeting calls against Michigan. So Colin Wilder and I believe John Torchio started that game at safety. He ended up having 5 tackles, a tackle for loss and a half, and then a sack and 2 passes defended. And then this year, the Purdue game, where he had 7 tackles, he had the interception, he forced a fumble and recovered it in the same play. And then I'm going to throw an honorable mention in here with the Grit Factory for the Iowa game. Didn't have big stats that game, but obviously started something that's now an emerging business for him once he's retired. So what would you go with?
I think it's a tie. I really do. And I'll say this about Colin Wilder. He's done a lot more than I expected, when he transferred here. Early on in his career, you could tell I thought maybe a special teams guy, occasional safety reps, but he's really turned into a guy that's a constant back there and a guy you can count on. I'll throw another honorable mention is after the Notre Dame loss, when he came in, and basically that's when that was for me the first sign of where I thought, hey, this guy's a leader on this team. Basically, he just owned the fact on how bad they were that day, how apologetic they were to the alumni for doing that in a big game like that. And that said a lot to me. I mean, he took some really tough questions that day because I thought there had to be some tough questions, and he handled them well. He didn't get resentful. He just was open and honest, and I've appreciated him. I think we've both done the story on him and the girl from Sun Prairie who he's befriended, who had cancer, and just they have a special relationship. But he's just another good dude, I think, and just a guy that is good for the team, regardless of what he does in terms of stats. I just think he's a good guy to have on the team. Yeah,
I think his role on the team is as a leader and just like one of those emotional spark plug type of guys is unquestioned, and he's got a bright future, whatever he ends up going into. And I know he's going for his master's right now, so whatever he goes into, it's going to be, I think he's going to be successful. Last one here for our super seniors, Caesar Williams. 2 moments I've got for you, Jim. The Minnesota game in 2019, the game that determined the Big Ten West Championship, top, I believe, 15 matchup. I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah, I think I always forget that, but Minnesota might have been in the top 10 that game.
Yeah,
Eighth or something?
Or was it 9? I think.
Okay,
but it was right there. He ends up with 5 passes defended, an interception, and then obviously that highlight goal line series against Tyler Johnson, where they throw at him once and then they come back the next play and basically throw the same play. And according to Caesar Williams, PJ Fleck stared at him the entire time before the play, so he knew the ball was coming to him. One of my favorite post-game interviews ever, and then just Caesar Williams stepping up against who's now a productive NFL wide receiver. And just quick, Tampa Bay Buccaneers aside, when they don't re-sign Chris Godwin after this year, it's because they love Tyler Johnson and think that he's going to be that level of production. So Tyler Johnson's got a very bright future coming up here in the pros, and Caesar Williams did a really good job against him that day. And then, there are a few others I could have picked, but I think Rutgers a couple of weeks ago, he had the pick 6, had a couple of tackles, and then in 3 targets, he didn't allow any catches. So, Jim, what would you go with?
I think Minnesota, just because of the magnitude of that game, right? I think that's pretty obvious. The Rutgers, great to see him get in the end zone. I think that kind of ended a drought for Wisconsin. They had been getting some takeaways, but to actually turn into 6 points was big. But I think that Minnesota game just meant so much more, and I like the anecdotes that came out of that game. And Jim Leonard was talking about him yesterday. You're doing a story he's a guy that's long, right? A little bit different body type, and he needed to learn to play like that. And so his career has really evolved too, and just he's dependable. He's not a guy that makes a ton of splash plays necessarily, but you just can kind of count on him.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And great guy to talk to. And you mentioned the story. Yeah, make sure you check out either Thursday night or Friday morning our feature on Caesar Williams. You're going to learn some stuff about him that I know has been out there a little bit, but just getting some more in depth on what he's been through in his life and the next step he wants to take. So that'll wrap it up for our super seniors discussion here. But just a great group of guys, honestly, to get to know a little bit, covering them and watch what they do on the field. And it's an odd situation. It's going to continue this way as they get through these COVID guys that have the extra year. But just knowing that you've got 6 guys that are playing their last game, it always kind of just makes you reminisce on like, oh yeah, he did that. Like, Kendrick Pryor had this type of big player. Caesar Williams had that series. It's, that's just a fun part of college football and the time that these guys spend in these programs. Like, as long as if they're playing, like there's a lot of opportunity for memories there.
Yeah, and I'll say this. I tell people this all the time, but the best part about covering this program is there are a lot of really good guys that pass through here. They do a good job of not only recruiting good players, but recruiting good people, and it just makes our job so much easier when you have the Caesar Williams and Faion Hicks and Kendrick Pryors, Colin Wilders of the world, who, they're good dudes, and they're helpful to you when you answer questions. They provide insight, and for the most part, there's been very few times over the years where I've had guys who don't handle adversity well. They know that we're just there to do our jobs, and they try to help us as much as they can do our jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's jump into Big Ten picks, and I don't want to run us too long here, so we'll go quickly through them because we agree on a bunch of them. But last week I went 5-1, Jim went 2-4. So right now on the season I am 49, 36-2.
That's
Jim,
impressive, by the way.
I know. I was feeling good on that one. Jim is 41, 44-2 on the year. All right. The only game that we disagree on, we'll start with that. Big marquee matchup here in the Big Ten. Going to go a long way in deciding who wins the Big Ten East. Michigan State is going to Ohio State. Ohio State is laying 19. I'm on Ohio State. This passing game is just too good. C.J. Stroud has overcome everything all the issues that he had early on in the year, and they've got Trayvon Henderson really running the ball well. Their offensive line is mauling people now. Like, everything that was plaguing the Buckeyes early on in the year has been fixed, it appears, and I just don't think that Michigan State's got enough firepower on offense to match what Ohio State can do. I'll lay the points, especially because it's in Columbus.
Yeah, I think I'm just doing this basically to go against you because every other pick I was pretty, I was confident on and on board with you. The only way I think Michigan State keeps this game within striking distance is to play ball hog, to just keep the clock moving, run the ball really well, hold Ohio State to field goals instead of touchdowns. I think they can keep it to like a 2-touchdown game. There's no way Michigan State's going to win this game, but the 19 was a little high for me for that reason.
Jim saying there's no way now is like, Michigan State might be able to pull the upset here. If you're a Michigan or a Wisconsin fan, which I assume you are if you're listening to this podcast,
you want that to happen.
Yeah, you want Michigan State to win the Big Ten East because if the Badgers get there, that's probably the best matchup they can have in terms of a talent standpoint and a matchup standpoint. So,
good point.
If you're a Wisconsin fan, and I think that game kicks off at 11, probably watching that game, rooting for Michigan State, and then, of course, the Buckeyes will disappoint you and make you feel pain like usual. All right, we'll go to the next one here. Purdue is an 11-point favorite at Northwestern this week. I'm on Purdue. I just don't think Northwestern has nearly enough on either side to stop a guy like David Bell, unless they just literally triple team him every play or something. So I think Purdue continues to roll there. And I think underrated little storyline for Purdue this year, Jeff Brown was quietly on the hot seat. I think if they didn't have a good year this year, there was going to be some conversation there. I think that's eliminated from what they've done, winning some of these big games, and they're going to go to a bowl game. Just which one is going to get determined by what they do the last 2 weeks here. So I think they kind of roll this one.
I agree. That Northwestern offense is so atrocious that I think Purdue is going to score enough and win comfortably.
Does it being at Wrigley Field matter to you at all?
I saw that. Not really. Fitz is making a push for a bowl game. A Chicago bowl game, and specifically
okay.
at Wrigley Field.
And for his team, I'm like,
that's
going to be tough.
No, yeah, sorry, I should have been more specific there. He wants a bowl game in Chicago. So yeah, I don't know. Apparently they're using the Cubs locker room for pregame warm-ups, but then they're using the bullpen for halftime. I don't know why. I don't know if it's just kind of from a procedural standpoint. If it's tough, yeah, it's weird. The thing about it, we could have been covering a game there last year, right?
Yeah.
Like Wisconsin was supposed to be there.
Northwestern there, yeah, for sure. All right. Rutgers is going to Penn State. Penn State is a 17-point favorite. I'm taking Rutgers here because it's a lot of points, and Penn State's got so many issues right now, and I don't know. I do think there's a wear and tear aspect of what Penn State has gone through this year. I mean, if you look at the past couple of weeks, they've played Michigan and Ohio State. I think in the last 3 weeks that's been their opponents. I think that they'll win this game in Happy Valley. I just think they'll be relatively even a 2-touchdown game is close enough. So I'll take the points.
Yeah, I agree. And Rutgers is so hard to read. I mean, you would have thought they were. I think I predicted last week that they're done right after the Wisconsin game. Then they wouldn't beat Indiana pretty handily. So I think they can keep it relatively within striking distance against Penn State.
For sure. All right, Illinois is going to Iowa. Iowa's a 12-point favorite. I was originally on Illinois on this game, and then about 10 minutes before we started recording, Brett Bielema came out that he has COVID and won't be there. I think it's going to be really tough for your head coach to have COVID and not have other coaches, possibly catch that. Obviously, hope everybody comes through and is fine from that. But I just think from a betting perspective, I don't think Illinois is going to have their full coaching staff, and that's going to be really tough against an Iowa team that I don't think is all that good. If you guys listen to this podcast, I'm not that high on Iowa, but they're in the same position of Purdue. Like, we're not the same as Purdue, but they're still trying to make sure that they can have a chance for the Big Ten West if Wisconsin slips up here in the last 2 weeks, and they're trying to get as good of a bowl game as they can. So I think they handle business against Illinois.
Yeah, and I think I would have taken them even pre-Bielema testing positive news. I just think 12 points. I don't think Illinois is going to score all that much. I think it's going to be kind of one of those ugly 17-3 games.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, Michigan is going to Maryland. Michigan is a 15-point favorite. I'm on Michigan. Maryland just does not. If we're talking about teams that are done, they kind of seem done with the year. And I don't blame them with all the injuries they've gotten and everything, but Michigan they need some style points. They need to be able to jump, as many teams as they can until they play Ohio State next week. So I'm going to take them laying the points.
I am too, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but do you give Michigan any chance next week against Ohio State?
I'd have to see what Michigan State does against them this week. Yeah. Going into it, I say no, but the only way I see it would be Michigan State somehow playing that clock control, physical football up front. And then I mentioned the wear and tear thing for Penn State. There's going to be some wear and tear for Ohio State, even as talented as they are. I mean, this is going to be two very physical games back-to-back for them. So I think Michigan has some chance, assuming Ohio State wins this weekend, but not a great one.
Agreed.
All right. Last one here. I didn't even put the Wisconsin game on here.
Oh.
Well, that wasn't a good idea. All right, so last one on the sheet, and then we'll do the Wisconsin game live. Minnesota is going to Indiana. Minnesota is a 7-point favorite at Indiana, and as we saw last week, Indiana, talk about done. 38-3 against Rutgers. That is horrendous. Can't be having that. So.
I wanted to make the wisecrack on Twitter that did Indiana suddenly forget how to steal signs from the other team?
Oh, got him. Yeah. And apparently love doesn't carry you that far. I don't know what happened there.
Right.
But if you can't tell, we are both on Minnesota. They've got it. You can't go into that Wisconsin game if you're Minnesota on a 3-game losing streak. And I think there's going to be some exercising some demons if they do get a lead. And then we've seen Indiana already that they're willing to fold.
Right.
So we were both on Minnesota there. And then we'll do the Wisconsin game live here because I'm not a good podcast producer. All right, Nebraska is coming to Wisconsin, and Wisconsin is a 9.5-point favorite, which is a very interesting number because Nebraska has not yet lost a game this year by double digits, and then it's right on that line. I think Wisconsin's the best defense that Nebraska has faced this year, and I just don't think that, regardless of what you can want to say about culture games and all this stuff from the Nebraska side, I don't know how you survive, or not survive, but how you come play a good football game when you've got a bunch of analysts and GAs running almost your entire offense with the 4 offensive assistants they fired. So I'm going to say Wisconsin covers, but probably not by a lot. I think 2 touchdowns is probably right about where it is.
To me, this really could go either way. Close, like every other Nebraska game, or Wisconsin just gets up early and it turns into a murder. Right, yeah. Yep. I could see that happening. I'm going to pick Nebraska, in part because I'm going to go against you and try to get back 2 games this week in the standings, but I don't know that I truly believe it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think this is Wisconsin gets up early, and I think Nebraska's fought about as hard as you can in some of these huge games. That they were in that Oklahoma game right to the end. They should have beat Michigan State, in all honesty. They were in the Nebraska or the Michigan game. They were in the Ohio State game. I just think that being in those games and then losing, and then everything that's going on, outside of the scope of the field with the coaching staff and everything, I just think that there's a level of you can't just keep getting that close and then getting your hopes dashed like that and then continue doing it. I think there's a level of not quit, but it's too much at a certain point.
That's why I think the first quarter is so important. If Nebraska, because like I talked before, Wisconsin hasn't trailed. If Nebraska can get a lead and kind of force Wisconsin to something it hasn't done in a while, that's big. And on the flip side, any early momentum from Wisconsin, and I think Nebraska could kind of throw in the white towel early. By the way, I've completely contradicted myself. I picked a 24-13 Wisconsin win on Badger Blueprint, the TV show I do on Channel 3. So now two people probably listen to this and watch that, and that's my mom and my wife. But they would probably have noticed that I've completely gone both ways here. So I can't be wrong. I can't be wrong, and I can't be right.
You're right on the line, though. You said 11 points. Yeah, 9.5, right about there. So you're on the Vegas line. So, all right. We will let you guys know how we do on picks next week. Make sure you're on madison.com for all of our Nebraska coverage throughout the week. And with basketball starting up, you can, if you're subscribed to this feed, you can get the basketball shows that Abby and Jim do once a week as well. So you can check all that out on madison.com. $5 for 5 months is the deal right now. So make sure you get signed up and get subscribed. That gets you through everything football-wise, basketball-wise, hockey, volleyball, everything else that's going on in Badger sports, along with everything that we do covering the news and the Madison area. So thank you guys very much for listening. We will be back next week.